Good morning. So we're running a little bit behind, so we're going to get started. My name is David K. McLaren. I am from IBM. I have the honor of being on the advisory board for the Center of Defense and Homeland Security. I'm also the honor today to introduce the research panel. So I'm going to do a short introduction, and I encourage you all to go to the event website and look at the full bios of our panelists today. So with us we have Dr. J.R. Rao. He is the Director of Security at IBM, Security Research at IBM. Sitting a little bit around the side so we can see the slides well, is Dr. Mark Zisman. He's the Associate Head of Cybersecurity and Information Sciences Division at MIT Lincoln Lab. We have Mr. Joshua Davis, who is the Senior Research Scientist and Head of Innovative Computing Division at Georgia Tech Research Institute. And we have with us from Fayetteville State University, Robert Reeder, who is from the School of Business and Economics, dealing with the Veterans Business Outreach Center. And so with that, I will go ahead and give each of the panelists 10 or more minutes to talk, and then we'll open it up to questions. Dr. Rao, if you can start us off, I really appreciate it.
Thanks very much, David, and I should begin by thanking Dr. Curtis and Fayetteville State University for inviting us to participate in the panel today. In the 10 minutes or so that we have, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about some of the underlying motivations around cybersecurity, and at least in my experience, the kinds of things we need to be able to do, especially from a public-private partnership, to be able to even begin addressing some of the problems that we face. So my departure point is going to be trying to set the stage for why it is that we are seeing this whole disruption in cybersecurity. It used to be when I started in this space, about 7-8 years ago, when we saw this increase in the scale, scope, and frequency of the attacks. And we started flagging and working in the space of cybersecurity. People used to say, what's so special about cybersecurity? Cyberspace was around since the 1980s, and security was something that we did. So what was it that has fundamentally changed, and why is it that the controls that we were using before, why can't we continue to use them now? And so then, I actually put together this particular picture to be able to illustrate exactly what was going on. So on the bottom left, what you see is what is the sort of the traditional model of the enterprise. This is exactly like a castle with a moat. I think we heard some terms that were used today, like layered defense and so on. But then what we witnessed in the last decade or more is 3 sets of fundamental changes that have actually altered that picture. And so the picture really looks like what's on the top right-hand side, which is more like the new enterprise model. And these changes have to do with organizational dynamics, workforce dynamics, and technology trends. And if you only focus on technology trends, you kind of sort of miss the picture because the other two are equally important. So from an organizational trend, what we've seen is, enterprises don't work alone. They're not isolated. They definitely work with business partners and suppliers. And if you look at, there's a huge amount of change that happens in the industry all the time. And it's not just the industry, even in the government sector, even in the Department of Defense, when we have coalition forces, where coalitions are brought together and torn down very quickly, we see a lot of rapid realignment that's happening. Just to give you a data point, one of our business units, which is called Software Group in IBM, in the last 10 years, it has made 80 acquisitions. So if you want to think about this, every time, what happens when you actually take 2 organizations, which are 2 different entities, and one acquires the other, you are actually bringing together 2 different entities, and you're saying the brick and mortar walls don't define us anymore and separate us anymore, but we are now going to be part of the same happy family. And then, so each is, when you do that, if you look at the security of the resulting enterprise, each is going to inherit the weaknesses of the other. Now, if that's a headache from a chief security officer perspective, imagine what a divestiture does. So you take a business unit that's homegrown, grown within the mothership, so to speak, and one fine day you say, all right, I'm going to divest this entity, I'm going to let it go. The business decision to do that takes effect the day the divestiture is signed, but it's very common for many years after the divestiture for the divested entity to still be part of the parent corporation or parent entity, and so future employees of that divested entity have access to assets, critical assets in the parent enterprise even after the divestiture has happened. And then all enterprises are growing; they're all globally integrated enterprises, and so this all leads to this notion of what we've been talking about for a few years now, called deperimetrization. That is, the perimeter by itself is not sufficient to protect the critical enterprise. Now, the second set of changes that we see have to do with what we call workforce dynamics. So clearly, most corporations, enterprises are globalized, and the workplace are ubiquitous. So we are in a stage where, this is true in IBM today. We have a significant proportion of our workforce that is comprised of contractors. What I was surprised to note when I first visited some of the Air Force labs is even the DoD has a large number of contractors. And so it's very easy for personnel to cross this perimeter that we say, and for them to come inside, while our own trusted, cleared people are working from outside. They're working from places like internet cafes or trains, planes, automobiles, etc. And so once again, the perimeter becomes somewhat vacuous. And then finally, we come to the technology trends. We see we are now moving to an era where we get computing services not from a raised floor, which is in the same building, but we're going to get it from a data center or a cloud. That's half a continent away. We are going to get, with mobility, it's a ubiquitous workplace. And then things like Internet of Things and Smarter Planet just take this idea to the extreme, which says that we are now, with ubiquitous deployment of sensors and actuators. What the picture is really looking at is the top right-hand side, that the perimeter no longer defines the boundary, but you can see people are able to enter, exit at different points. So this is an era in which everything is connected to everything else. That's the way you have to think about it. And so, when you think about it, what actually changes in terms of the current, in terms of risk? And for that purpose, we created this particular chart. And so what we laid out on the horizontal axis is the evolution of threats that have happened because of these organizational, workforce, and technological changes. So on the bottom left, you see that we were dealing with existing threats for a long time. These are threats that come from vulnerabilities in servers, endpoints, and networks. Things like malware, distributed denial of service, unauthenticated access. But where the threat is moving is more to the right-hand side, where because of this deperimetrization that's happening in the business and in the IT boundaries, we're now seeing an uptick and new kinds of threats. So we've heard at least 2 or 3 times this morning about some of the insider threats that can be maybe lower in frequency, but they're quite devastating because of the extent of privileged access. We look at things like Trojan ICs. There's a very interesting question asked about hardware security this morning. And this is the case where, for very good purposes, for very good economic and cost purposes, we would outsource some parts of the design and fabrication of chips. But when the chips come back from the fabs, which are typically overseas, some small fraction of them are going to have hardware trojans embedded in them. So once again, this is where this deperimetrization, this globally integrated enterprise, is, this kind of a paradigm is tilting the security balance. And so, if you look at the vertical axis, the risk has gone up, and on the top left-hand side, they certainly have had business-level risks for a while. The kinds of things that we even read today, the theft of personally identifiable information, credit card information, protected health information. This is something, if you look at where the security industry is, we've had controls, we've had ways of actually dealing with these losses, right? Whether it's a database firewall, or it is, or IPS or an IDS or a data loss prevention solution. Multiple vendors have multiple solutions in place. And we've had a handle on this problem. So if you consider the credit card companies, yes, there's some amount of credit card fraud that goes on. But at the end of the day, when you tally the books, you still come up in the black. You write off maybe 2, 3, 4, 5% to fraud. and losses to fraud, but at the end of the day, you're still in the black and it pays to continue doing business. But where the action has moved is to the top right-hand side. Where we are not looking at threats to an individual business alone, we are looking at ecosystem level risks. And that, in my mind, is how we define cybersecurity. Where now what we're talking about is subversion of the entire sort of the critical infrastructure, espionage and theft of top secret information, and some of the aspects that we talked about this morning actually bear evidence to this. So what you have to imagine is how the adversary, be it a criminal enterprise or a nation-state level actor, how they are actually undermining the security of the ecosystem. Let's say the ecosystem here, you can think of it as the nation. They are kind of mapped out in their mind, not mind, I would say. They've actually mapped out what the supply chain for a particular society actually looks like. So for example, that's exactly what goes behind this whole concept of supply chain. If I can subvert some of the supply chain of chips and put hardware trojans, then every entity in this ecosystem that's downstream and consumes these chips, I get a toehold in, right? Now, let me give you another example. A few years ago, we saw the attack on RSA. So RSA makes these secure ID tokens, and these secure ID tokens are used by many entities downstream to enable their workers, their employees, to log in and work on their projects remotely. So the secure ID tokens enable remote authentication. So it was not a surprise to me that once RSA was actually attacked, within a few weeks of it, we started hearing about how some of the federal system integrators, like Lockheed Martin and others, were attacked because personnel of Lockheed Martin use things like secure ID tokens to be able to log in remotely and work on sensitive government projects. So that is what I mean by an ecosystem level risk, where things are breached at upstream so as to gain advantage downstream. Let me give you another example. So we saw the breach on Anthem, and we saw, and the numbers are still coming out. But what that exposes is a lot of information about a particular person, a lot of very confidential, personally identifiable information. And that information can then be used downstream in many, many nefarious ways. So if you, for example, know some intimate facts about the health history of an individual, you might actually be able to guess as to how long that person might actually remain in office in a particular position, how he might actually move around, what things might actually happen downstream in his employment, which is completely different from where that person actually, where the records for that person, which is in Anthem, were actually being maintained. And so this is the challenge. As a society, we have organized ourselves in terms of academia, in terms of government, in terms of commercial entities. We've built some silos around each other. But to be able to, and so we have things like procurement and supply chain, and this is how we're organized. But the adversary is painting us into a corner, because to be able to solve this problem, we really have to break down some of these silos. So no longer can I trust a piece of technology that RSA gives me. If I'm the chief security officer of IBM, the security of my enterprise depends upon how well the chief security officer of RSA is doing his job. Because if they are doing a poor job and I depend upon them for what they give me, then I'm going to suffer the consequences of that. And it's in this sense that this cybersecurity poses a fundamental challenge to the way we have thought through and built and organized our society. Now, let me move on here. To address some of these problems, we at IBM Research have a five-pronged approach. And it is intensely, and I'll talk to you about one of these, the issues that comes out here. This agenda is intensely centered around defense. So IBM is cast in the mold of many of our customers, and many of our customers don't go and launch cyber attacks on entities. They are in business for very good reasons, for whatever their core skills and competencies are. And so the way, again, we are organized, offense is something that we leave to US Cyber Command, and defense is what most enterprises do. And so this agenda is around defense. And the agenda is very simple. It starts by saying, let us discover where the mission critical assets are and where the sensitive data is. Once we know that, let's use analytics, and that's in IBM we use the term security intelligence, to actually monitor and understand how our networks and devices are being used and accessed, and how users are using their entitlements to access these high value assets. Once we know this, we have a better understanding of ground truth. We know what the situational awareness is. It's at that point, in recognition of the diminishing value of the perimeter, we are going to build fine-grained perimeters around our high-value assets. And that's where we're looking at how to secure the foundations, everything from improving hardware security to improving cloud security. The fourth area we work is on endpoint security, end-to-end security, where we look at how we can secure the mobile enterprise, things like bring your own devices and cyber physical systems. And we try to do all this using some of the best of breed techniques in security engineering and in cryptography. Now that's our agenda, but there are some issues that, fundamental issues that I raised previously that need to be addressed. So let me talk about some of this. To execute on an agenda like this, clearly there is an element of security education, not just in terms of increasing the awareness within our employees as to not to go and click on a link from somebody they don't know, not to get spearphished into an attack, but also in terms of trying to create a particular pipeline. And I think in this morning session, we heard a fair bit along these lines, and I applaud the work that is being done here and at other such institutions to be able to create that pipeline. Because if there is a problem that I'm facing at work today, as Director of Security Research at IBM, it is the lack of talent. We have eaten our seed corn faster than we can grow it, and we need the talent in this space to address some of these problems. The second is this issue again of offense versus defense. And as I mentioned to you, IBM plays defense. From a business perspective, it makes a lot of sense to us because we do business in about 176 different countries. But as we all know, good defense is predicated on good offense and vice versa. So this is a place where we share information, we participate in sharing threat and vulnerability intelligence with a number of industry verticals. Some of you may know things about the FSI SAC. So the financial services sector has something called the Financial Services Information Security Center, where they actually monitor, they actually share information amongst each other, everything ranging from there are a few bank robbers on the news in New Jersey to saying that there are 5 vulnerabilities that have been just announced in Internet Explorer or in Safari, and so you should go and patch those immediately. So that is something that needs to grow because that's something that can be grown easily in sharing of threat and vulnerability intelligence without having to actually break down physical barriers and how we actually function. Then there is the example of public-private partnerships. Now, this is a little tricky. This has actually started, so IBM, for example, we have a very good university relations unit. We work with universities like Fayetteville State University and other universities. We have campus relationship managers. But if you want to think bigger than this, more broader than just a university relationship, you're talking about key players in the IT industry coming together with key sectors of the government, sitting at the same table with key leaders from academia to try to solve this problem. Now, some of you may have seen an event that happened a few weeks ago. This is when President Obama actually visited Stanford University. And there was a day-long seminar where the day was spent, where the president was talking to leaders from Silicon Valley on 2 topics. One was cybersecurity, and the other was consumer protection. And I think, that we have concerns about both, and these were all addressed. Some of these were addressed this morning. But the key point to make was the president was also, so you should look at some of the streaming videos of the event that are still available online. And the key point the president was making was that it's again not a problem that can be solved by one party alone. However, this is easier said than done because there is an issue of and the government has done a few things. So a few years ago, they did something called National Cyber Leap Year. They recognized that we cannot solve the problem of cybersecurity by just incrementally expanding the efforts underway. So I think it was very eloquently said that you can't get there by starting here. So you need some game changers. And so the government came up with 5 game changers, and they had this National Cyber Leap Year where they brought leaders together to have a discussion. Again, take a look at this. Some of this stuff is out there still on the web. Very nice reports were written. But really the question is, how do you follow up on this? Because ultimately, if we want to solve this problem within the constraints of how we have set ourselves up, so we need an issue of alignment of incentives. So definitely we need to ensure the security of the ecosystem that we are working in. So there are considerations of national security. We want to work with the corporate enterprises, and they are driven by commercial incentives, driven by differentiation and innovation. So at the end of the day, they are judged by their quarterly earnings. And then we have to sit down with the best minds in academia who are driven by desire of furthering the boundaries, doing scientific exploration, and being able to publish. So how do we align these incentives to be able to still solve the problem? I think that is still very much a discussion that's taking place. And so my last chart is just to tell you that these are some of the problems that we are looking at in the 12 global labs that IBM Research has, practically one on every continent except Antarctica, and I gather that's not ruled out yet. And this is going to be, security research is in 6 of those labs, which are highlighted in red. We are about 70 researchers in the core security discipline, much more if you look at adjacent areas. We are seeing this problem. One thing that we get by having this kind of a global presence is we have our finger on the pulse of different countries, of different geographies, of what's happening with respect to security in different places. And we are seeing this problem across the planet. We are seeing threats, we are seeing attacks, we are seeing concerns across the board, be it the Middle East, be it the Far East, Tokyo, in India, and in Europe as well. So these are some of the things that we're working on with partners, academic partners and commercial partners in this space. And I think this is very much a pressing problem that needs to be solved. So I'll pause here.
Thank you, Dr. Rao. Dr. Zisman, if you'd like to continue, that'd be great.
So good morning, my name is Mark Zisman. I work at MIT Lincoln Laboratory. Lincoln Laboratory is a Department of Defense, federally funded research and development center out in Lexington, Massachusetts. So you want to go ahead, next slide. This slide shows a little bit, probably most of you aren't aware of Lincoln Laboratory, unlike maybe you're certainly aware of IBM. So I thought I'd just take a second here to introduce you to what it is that we do. So Lincoln Laboratory is about 12 miles outside the Boston area, about 12 miles away from MIT, which is in Cambridge. And our mission is technology in support of national security. And particularly what we do is kind of dwell in technologies, develop those technologies, and build prototypes for the Department of Defense and others in the national security community that show how technology and systems can be put together to solve important national problems. So back in the day, 50, 60 years ago, those prototypes tended to be big radar systems or big satellite communication systems. These days, of course, there's software in all of those systems, and indeed there are even prototypes that are only software. And so that has really changed over the 60 years of our existence. Our mission areas are shown on the bottom. Air and missile defense is where we got our start when we were worried about Soviet bombers coming over the North Pole. But very quickly we expanded as the threats expanded. The laboratory expanded as well, expanded our kind of our view of things. And you can see, hopefully, on the right-hand side, cybersecurity is one of our newest mission areas. It is the newest mission area. We have approximately 300 people working in that area right now, research, staff, scientists, engineers, and support. And I'm part of the leadership team mainstream of that mission area. So what I wanted to do today was talk first a little bit about what we think the challenges are in cybersecurity, more from a national security DoD perspective. And then Dr. Charles asked me to drill down into a particular initiative that we have with a local university, because we wonder whether that initiative might be something that can be adapted to FSU here or to other universities around the country. So that's what I'm going to do. So first, let me tell you a little bit about how we view cybersecurity. There are really four main areas where we're supporting DoD and others in the national security community. One is in understanding the cyber-kinetic overlap. So what that means is helping a commander, for example, a general, admiral, or a colonel, whatever it might be, kind of understand how cyber is impacting, how cyber could impact the mission that he wants to do. So for example, it could be on the defensive side. You know, he has maybe he's got a ballistic missile defense mission, and the question is, how could cyber maybe impact that negatively? What might the adversary do to make that mission stop? Or there might be from the offensive side. You know, what are the cyber bullets that he might want to have, and how does he compare those to the other capabilities he's got? For example, you know, aircraft that could drop bombs to achieve some objective. And how should he compare the cyber and the kinetic methods of achieving effect? So that's the first thing we do, is look at the cyber-kinetic overlap. The second is cyber situational awareness. This is really helping him understand what is the status of all of his cyber systems that are in his or her inventory, and unfortunately, how might the bad guys, how might the adversaries be in those systems, and what are their capability inside his own systems? So we'd like to provide him better cyber situational awareness. A third is building systems to be more resilient right from the start. It's impossible to keep the adversary out, but at the end of the day, what you'd really like to ensure is that national security missions succeed, despite the fact that adversaries might attack us in ways that we can't stop. So how do you build these systems to be less fragile and more resilient so that they can support the mission, which is at the end of the day what's important. And finally, we do a lot of work in cyber assessment, the development of cyber ranges, and testing technology and concepts of operation on those ranges to see how well they work. So that's really the area, those are the cyber areas that Lincoln Laboratory works in support of DoD. But now, as Dr. Charles asked, let me just tell you a little bit about one initiative we have with the MIT campus that's called Beaverworks. So we'll go on to the next slide. So we conceived, one of my colleagues, Dr. Bob Shin, conceived of developing a way, although we're all MIT employees at Lincoln Laboratory, yet our ability to collaborate with the campus is not always as great as we'd like it to be. And so he conceived of this initiative where Lincoln Laboratory would get better access to MIT students, the smart graduates and undergraduates and the faculty, where we would get them working on our problems, national security problems that they might not otherwise be aware of. And where on the MIT side, they would get better project-based learning than they were capable of getting, as it stood, from the professors who were teaching them. So we would help those professors, give them better projects, maybe in their fourth year, the undergraduates in their fourth year, in these capstone projects that many of the departments require. And so these were the major goals behind Beaverworks. Go to the next slide. And we were able to put that together. And so we have a facility now on the MIT campus. So remember, Lincoln Laboratory is 12 miles away from MIT, but we now have this facility right on the MIT campus. For those of you who may be familiar with Cambridge, it's in Technology Square, which is the northernmost part of the campus. And what we use this for is better collaboration between the laboratory and the campus through these project-based courses. And I want to just give you an example of one of those. A couple of them go ahead. Well, I've got here a picture. This is the building it's in, and you can see that we're located very close. We actually find that location is very important. It turns out that MIT professors and MIT students are very busy. They have lots of opportunities to work on lots of things. Google, Microsoft Research, others are all located in the same area. If we aren't located there too, then we're not going to get their attention. So location is very important. Go ahead. This is what the facility looks like. I'm going to get to how we use this for cybersecurity in a minute. But first, let me tell you a little bit about some of the non-cyber projects that go on here. So you can see that there's a teaching space. There's on the bottom left, a collaboration space where the students can put things together. And there's actually also a machine shop you can see in the lower right-hand corner that gives the student access to the standard kinds of drill presses and 3D printers and et cetera that you see in a standard machine shop. Go ahead. It was opened, this center was opened a couple of years ago, and I only put up this slide to tell you that the center is actually both part of Lincoln Laboratory and part of the School of Engineering at MIT. And this is something that has support from the president of MIT, from the dean of the School of Engineering, and of course from our director at Lincoln. Go ahead. So there have been a lot of different projects. If you look up there, cybersecurity is second. I'll get to that in a minute. Most of these are kind of mechanical engineering, aero-astro related, as you might expect, but even a humanitarian initiative down at the bottom. On the right side, you see all the different labs and departments and so on that support the center. And so support doesn't just mean that they say, yeah, this is a great thing. They actually, we get little bits, but we get bits of money from them every year. It's in their budget to go ahead and support the operation of the center. And you can see that the center director, Bob Shin, has been very successful in getting support from a wide variety of folks at MIT. Go ahead. So the core of this is these capstone projects. And so the bottom line here was that if you were in a fourth year capstone project in aerospace engineering, whatever it might be, typically what would happen in that class is that the students would split up. There might be 25 students in the class. They'd split up into teams of 2 or 3 or 4, and they would work on some small projects. They would design them, they would build them over the course of either a half a year or a year. What our vision was that the whole class would work on one project, and that the project would be big, and that Lincoln Laboratory would help provide the mentorship, would help provide some funding, which would pay for a research assistant and also pay for equipment, and this is the key thing for an industrial or laboratory educational partnership, we would help provide the project idea itself. And what we came to find was that our DoD sponsors, whether they were the Air Force or others, were very interested in learning how MIT students would, even if they were undergraduates, would attack particular problems of interest to them, the Air Force, or to some of our other sponsors. So that's the basic idea here. It's project-based learning with big projects that are far and away larger than those professors would have been able to do on their own, would have been able to manage on their own. And here are some of those projects. Many of them are UAV, are drone, unmanned air vehicle related, where they would design and actually build these systems. We also have UUVs underwater, unmanned underwater vehicles that have been designed and tested. And in fact, there have been inventions as part of these, the design and the implementation of these vehicles that have gone off, that have caused these students to go ahead and patent and then spin off companies to go build these things and exploit them further once they graduate. Go ahead. So hopefully I've given you a sense of what BeaverWorks is, this BeaverWorks center is, and I told you about all the aero-astro and the mechanical stuff, but of course you're more interested in the cyber pieces. So far we haven't been able to find or convince an MIT professor at CSAIL or the Department of Computer Science that he should take his entire fourth-year class and do a big project in cyber the way we've been able to do with UAVs and with the mechanical and aero-astro projects that we've had. But we have had 2 big initiatives that have been very successful. That's what I want to tell you about. There are BeaverWorks initiatives in cybersecurity. One is a capture the flag competition. We've been running this on an annual basis. I'm showing you here this one from 2013. This was sponsored in part by the National Security Agency. And the idea here was to take teams from colleges from around the area, MIT, Wellesley, Boston University, even out to Rensselaer and down even at NYU. And bring them in, teach them about cyber defense and cyber offense. Now these were mostly undergraduate, although some graduate computer science majors. And then have a 48-hour, over a weekend, a 48-hour contest, a competition with almost no holds barred, where the job of the defense was to keep certain web services up and running. The job of the offense was to attack those services and keep them from running. And so you can see here, there were cash prizes. You can see here this particular year MIT happened to win, but in different years, different folks won. The Northeastern team has an excellent offense almost every year. And so why did we do this? One reason we did it was to raise the awareness of cybersecurity research in general on all of these campuses. Another was, of course, recruiting for us. We have been able to hire some of the members of some of these teams, which has been great. But also, it's gone even further. The Wellesley team, the professor that supports the Wellesley team, he was able to change the course that he was teaching, the cybersecurity course that he was teaching that year at Wellesley, to not exactly to teach to our contest, but definitely to make sure that his students were well prepared to participate in the contest. And I think that being able to kind of shape the curriculum at some of these universities, now maybe some will be easier than others, but I think that's been a big win for us. And I think that we look forward to continuing to do that in these cyber capture the flags at university level. Go ahead. We do the same. We do a similar thing at the high school level. So here, CyberPatriot is a national competition. We are just participants in that competition. But what we do here is sponsor several teams at the high school level. It's defense only. There's no offense. But the students here are very smart kids who, in some cases, have plenty of experience programming. We teach them about cybersecurity, how to defend their systems, and they've done, in this case, very well. In some cases, making it to the national champions and winning the state competitions. And so I would urge you, at your own organizations, as I said, CyberPatriot's a national competition. Maybe you can look for a way to find a team that you can sponsor in your local community, just as we've been able to do. Go ahead. So that's a sense of how BeaverWorks operates. It's this partnership between our laboratory and one particular university. We're looking to expand it to other universities. I don't know whether this exact approach would work here at a place like FSU, but I wonder whether, I do think that some of these ideas could be adapted to work here effectively to bring together kind of the laboratories, the industry, and the educational institutions. Thanks.
There was that program when I was in school. Mr. Davis, if you could go ahead and shoot, I'd be very thankful.
All right, so I'm a fast talking Southerner, so forgive me. We're a little bit different. What's funny is the stuff you've done at MIT, very similar to Georgia Tech. It's just different. And we're about half the size of MIT's in the lab. GTRI, can you put it in full screen mode? No, just press it. Power Google, hold on. There we go. Network slow. No worries. I'm doing advertisement for Windows right now. There you go. Okay. So, Joshua Davis, Georgia Tech Research Institute, real quick, similar MIT, Lincoln Labs. Same Cold War era built the system. We're predominantly DoD. We're not academic, but we kind of are. I don't have to publish, and those who don't know what that means, when you're typically an academic, you got to publish, that's sort of your currency. In my world, even though we have funding, I'm hungry all the time. So I'm kind of this weird quasi-academic / contractor who's got to feed himself. So the cool thing is, anybody that I can find has got a problem to solve with money, I can solve it. This is pretty awesome. So about 2,000 people, about 1,000 US citizens who are cleared doing anything you can think of security related. So part of this whole conversation here is about this interchange. What can we do to help connect these? So part of what I want to convey to you guys is sort of the perspective of cyber. And I heard some people mention today, which I agree with fully, it's a cultural change. So what I'm about to share a little bit, some of it's my own opinion, so please don't be offended or blame Georgia Tech. So yeah, and I'll try not to swear. Next slide. All right, so who in here knows what Urban Dictionary is? Okay, so I just want you guys to know that the kids sitting in the back of the room think cyber means this, and I'm not going to say this out loud. All right, it's kind of be funny. All right, so it means sex, okay? That's what cyber means, all right? So not really, but in this world that we're building with cyber, it's not serious, it's funny, it's weird. Next slide. This is DoD's definition of cyber. Okay, now what's happened is, my belief, my hope is the leadership said, hey, we want to evolve the culture of the military, evolve the culture of the nation, and pay attention to cyber. Cyber has opened up our eyes to what are the threats in the world. By the way, everyone who's got a phone in here, which you all do, you're part of the cyber war, period. I mean, you're going to be from now on. We're going to be fighting this war forever. But we got to change the way we think. So this cyber command is helping us to shape and change that message. So DoD's got to change fast. Part of the problem with DoD, though, most of you don't know, acquisition process. Acquisition process is so freaking long, and the war we're in right now, it's really fast, and it doesn't take a lot of money. Next slide. So this is my grandmother thinks cyber war is about. You know, blowing up computer, doing kind of crazy radical hacker stuff. Next slide. This is what my government's thinking about. How many of you have heard about Stuxnet? Okay, so how many of you have not heard about Stuxnet? Okay. So imagine you're enriching uranium because you want to build, I don't know, maybe a bomb. And all of a sudden, magically, this Windows-based platform, this virus gets on it somehow magically, even though it's air-gapped, gets on there and causes the system to miscommunicate information such that it breaks down the physical system. So supposedly, the Iranian nuclear program was halted by a virus that spread across the globe and caused a physical damage. Now that's billions of dollars that some software from some nerds, which you can say whoever it is, doesn't matter, some nerds wrote it and caused this problem. So my belief is these things in the news that we keep seeing, all these breaks, it's going to keep happening. And we got to learn how to adapt and live. So this cultural change is learning how to survive and work in this environment. The kids in the back of the room are the ones going to be building it. We're kind of, I guess, dismantling what we've built over the past, 100 years, such that we can play in this new world. Because what's happened too, software, and this is some of my biased opinions, software is knowledge. So if you see you ever seen the pyramid of data, information, knowledge? Software is the first time we humans can say, here's the laws of physics, and give it to another computer, and it doesn't cost me. Instantaneously, the computer knows the same thing. Now the human doesn't, but I can use that tool. So my belief is you're going to start seeing more adoption and use of software in our everyday lives, helping us to make decisions. And as IBM gentleman said, which data is every freaking thing. And you as individuals in here are going to need more software to help manage the data overload. Next slide. So this is my kid, okay? Maxwell Garrett Davis. Went to a hacking competition, one of the college ones we had. We call it Hungry Hackers. So the cool thing there was we had a gumball machine set up with a lock on it. My son, an 8-year-old, was taught by some nerds how to pick the lock. And he was better than most of the college kids. And then he went home and drew this picture. And Winston's one of the guys that works with me. This is my 8-year-old. Now, learning how to do evil is so good. It's not really evil. Hacking is not bad. Hacking is a cultural view of being creative, being a MacGyver. So my son's going down that path, and I'm going to keep pushing this way. And I don't want him to go to jail, because I'm not going to teach him how to break into computers, because at least right now, without prior authority, it's illegal. Next slide. So what I propose is an idea that I've been bouncing around. So, and I don't want to insult some of the defense side, but offense and defense, I said it earlier. If you only defend, you can only be so good. You can only be so creative if you stay only in a defensive posture. So my day job, this would never fund my day job. This is sort of like a hobby of let's see if we can build just a massive amount of high school kids on a regular basis hacking, offensive and defensive. Not for nefariety, but actually changing the world. So next slide. So computer clubs are not cool, okay? I'm sorry. I wasn't cool when I was in school, and I'm sure it's not as cool now. Yeah, next slide. Everyone knows what exclamation equal, at least in C++. No, it's coding. Okay, I'm trying to be nerdy because I don't like coding anymore. All right, hacker clubs, cool. So kind of what I'm proposing, guys, is get past some of these uncomfortable views of what cyber is and being worried about offense versus defense, and just accept some cultural changes and have fun. Because the kids in the world are going to be doing this stuff whether or not we enable them, and we can enable them how to do it well, do it wisely, and make the world a better place. So that's it for now, and I didn't swear, so good.
We've got about 7 minutes for questions. So if folks have questions, please ask them now. We only have the one microphone, so what I suggest is just project your question loudly, and I'm sure our panelists are used to projecting back.
I have a question regarding the Hackers Club. I'm very, very interested in that initiative on our campus. I wanted to know how students are receiving, that kind of, what kind of interest are you getting in that Hackers Club?
So somebody call it cyber. Yeah, no, you're on the CyberPatriot. That has a lot of interest, right?
Yeah.
Now,
I know the CyberPatriot. Do you prepare them for CyberPatriot, or is just?
So no, this is more of a concept. This is built upon seeing the collegiate stuff happen. We opened up an actual capture flight we had last year to high school kids and did some tutorials at the beginning. And it amazed me how many high school kids showed up. It was still a small event. It was probably about 150 people, but like 25 to 30 were high schoolers. The cool thing was some of the high schoolers placed pretty high, actually second place. So this concept of this club, it's just an idea right now. I met Miss Edna, I don't know her last name here, Dr. Edna. I'm gonna go see her next week to see about finding ways to fund it. Because I don't think it's expensive, but I don't know, it's just this idea of reaching down to high school, because I didn't have it when I was a kid. I didn't know anything about software, other than playing video games. So that's why I want to be a software person, because video games. But nowadays, to me, hacking is so freaking cool to kids. If you just tell someone you got a hacking club, I mean, you're gonna find, which I find even cooler, women engaging, girls engaging, which is normally difficult in some of these domains. And I can tell you this, some girls can be pretty evil at hacking. It's being manipulative. And I would say that not women are manipulative, but this whole domain is a con artist kind of a thing. That's all it is. So to answer your question, a lot of interest. It's just got to find the right kind of funding model that'll sustain it. Because it's not going to make money. It doesn't need to. It needs just empowerment.
And I think, if I could just add, I think with CyberPatriot, what we found is that what you need are just 5, 6, 7 high school kids. It's not very many. You need a guide or a coach or whatever you want to call it. So I would assume that for example, around here it could be a high school teacher. Maybe it could be somebody here from FSU who could do that. I think the cost is minimal. I'm actually not aware of the cost. I think it's minimal, and I think there are opportunities if there are small costs to get those offsite. I think there are people who donate. I know we at Lincoln Laboratory do that. And we found just like Joe was saying is that it's very exciting. Kids want to learn, and they're very good at it. It's surprising how good they can be, and so it's just an opportunity you might want to think about.
One thing to add too is I think barrier to entry is pretty high on a lot of these because you expect to have a lot of knowledge. Part of the theory, the idea that I have is having reach back to, like, say, campuses. With part of the vision for the club is to have reach back to a college club that's every month teaching their own. Have them also teach the high school kids too. So finding ways to repurpose existing content. Because I know there's a lot of schools that probably don't have the talent, but if you have just some sort of a mentor who's wanting to learn, kids will probably figure out for the well anyway. But it's about empowerment, and internet makes things really easy to copy and paste.
Great. Any other questions?
So obviously, a lot of cybersecurity revolves around the technical aspect. How do we approach training people and kids to engage on the social engineering side of cybersecurity? Not that I'm like advocating teaching.
No, I think my personal opinion is we should, because part of the problem with our society right now is we're not aware of the problems. My grandmother is delusional in regards to how safe she is on her computer, and the problem is she's participating by allowing malware and stuff to enable botnets, and we all are. So I'm an advocate for teaching to be evil, teaching how you manipulate people so that you can defend yourself. How do you do it? You do stuff like we're talking about, and getting past some of the fear that we're going to be empowering kids with evil. Because they're going to find it themselves. They're going to still solve for themselves, and teaching them the consequences of it. Yeah.
So let me share one particular exercise. So what we do for some of our employees in IBM is, of course, we have on an annual basis we have them take a course to actually sign, sort of digital. Think of it as digital conduct guidelines, where you understand how to interact with sort of social media, etc. But that's education can only, that kind of education can go only so far. So what our chief security officer actually does is, periodically we have some campaigns. We have, for example, a spear phishing campaign, and we put this campaign together where they send out a mail message to some segment of the population, the IBM population, saying, hey, guess what? We have a high priority request from this from this client team, and can you please send these plans immediately to this address? And it's a spear phishing attack, but it's more like red teaming. And when this was actually put together, an interesting side remark is that the population that was being targeted, people were wondering who should we really include the senior executives in this, and they were going to rule them out, but they said no, put them in, because they are the people who also actually go and click on some of these things. And so that actually increases. So once you actually click on it, then you look, you went and clicked on something, and this is something you shouldn't be doing. So this kind of education, I think, is important within enterprises, but this could also be undertaken in the context of a controlled environment like a school, like a high school for students. Many schools are issuing email addresses for their students. Students are encouraged to bring in, their tablets, their iPads. A lot of the education is now moving on to iPads. And so I think this is something that, that can be done. And not just having classroom instruction, but in the field, in practice, trying to red team them and see how they would react to posts on ranging from posts on Facebook or Twitter to how they might open up email, and then getting back to say, hey, we did something we should be doing, and there's nothing like learning on the job.
I'll just give you one anecdote. So we did the same thing that sounds like IBM does, at least. And so I would say we have three kinds of folks when we do this red teaming. We drop CDs or thumb drives, or whatever. It says, salary information 2015. We see who opens it up. So there's three kinds of people at Lincoln. So unfortunately, there's a small number who will go ahead and open that up, and they get, we ping it. It's actually not about, it's about education. It's actually an assessment of how well our existing education is working, our cyber education is working. So there's a small segment that does that. There's a second segment that is smart enough and says, I remember, I know what this is, and they just let it alone. But it's really the third segment that's the best. Those are the folks that stand up their own isolated test bed, take the software, reverse engineer it, and then make comments back to our security department and say, you know what, this red team software really wasn't very good, and next time you do it, you got to do it this way or that way. And it's really, and you'd like to think that those guys are all in the cyber, in my division, cyber division. They're not. They're all over the lab, and that's actually what you're looking for.
So, but that's the creative piece. So we don't drop thumb drives in the parking lot, but we do the same thing. We've done it to companies though. But like this concept, that's offensive cyber. That's not defensive. Now, red teaming, who doesn't know what red teaming is? So red teaming is attacking yourself. So you're pretending to be a bad guy and attack yourself. You need to do that because you want to find those holes first. So yeah, be evil. Just get paid to be evil and get the contract saying that you can be. That's called ethical hacking.
We have time for one last short question. Does anybody have some? All right, if not, that is great. Please thank the panelists.